Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon. We hope everybody had a great end of March and start to April. Today we are reviewing the content that we watched between March,
And April at this time.
right. When we last recorded our last video, it was March 8th. So the watching period began after we made that video and ended today. So we have a lot to talk about, as we always do. First of all, we wanted to talk about life updates, which I somehow erased from the top of this. So, um, at the end of March, my mom and I went to talk at USM to a class of prospective teachers about disability rights awareness, about her book, Fighting for Yes, in the book we co wrote. Um, we want to go to school to fight for disability rights. It went really well. It was very well received. But after we finished getting our feedback from that lecture that we gave, we found out that the funding to Maine Humanities was going to be cut. And I'm going to mention this again. I mentioned this in the short video that I made a couple of weeks ago before we went to the rally. Please go to the Maine Humanities website and sign the petition to reinstate the funding. And also, please support your local libraries because their funding is at risk of being cut as well. Um,
And the reason for us attending the rallies is not only because of the funding, but also what Donald Trump is doing to cut acts like Medicaid and education. And we cannot allow that to happen, especially for people like us.
no, we can't. And that's why we encourage all of you who are watching to get politically active in your own communities. Write to your senators, call your senators, attend rallies, do anything that you can about these issues that are important to all of us. And then also, there was one other thing. No, I don't remember what it was. Okay, the next thing we wanted to talk about was our art show at Double House that was on Friday.
Jean and I both sold a total of what cost about $90 for me. And one of the artwork that I made in the class, my mother bought, which was a, a view of the sea and what I call beginning of daylight savings, because it's usually that time right before spring you start to see a little bit of buds that are come up on the trees. But in addition, I also put together the prior to the art show, a couple of colorful little pots where some flowers went in, and they're especially cool for Easter. One woman bought mine that I recreated an old supermarket chain, Stop and Shop.
And the pieces of artwork that I sold were bought by my mother, my sister, and my mother-in-law, and also from another community member who bought my friends and Gilmore Girls fan art, which I appreciate. I appreciate all the purchases. Um, that I think I made a little bit under $90. I'm really bad at doing math. I have to recalculate everything again. But usually what happens is that the fan art I make that doesn't sell, we just donate the money to the Matthew Perry Foundation. That's what we're going to do this time too.
And one more thing before we start doing our entertainment point is both G and I are going to be at the interviews for Career Day for the Vertical Harvest in Westbrook, Maine, because they're getting so much closer to the hiring process and when the whole factory is going to start selling.
And we're very excited. The one last thing I want to mention about political engagement is um I am personally boycotting Amazon and no longer use Goodreads or Book Sirens because Amazon does not support people with disabilities. So if you want to follow me on Storygraph, the link will be in the description box below. And I also encourage you all to shop locally. If you want to buy stuff on Amazon, just buy them from local independent
Mhm.
retailers, like local independent bookstores or stuff like that. And keep that in mind also when you shop for my birthday this summer, that I do not support Amazon anymore.
Okay, so let's see what our schedule is. We have a couple of theater reviews that we want to mention, and both of them were seen at Merrill Auditorium. So the first one Janine saw alone with her provider. So if you might share it with us.
Yes. So on the last Monday in March, my mobility specialist at vocational rehab took me to the production of Frog and Toad at the Merrill Auditorium. This production was performed by a traveling theater company called Wishing Star Productions. We had previously seen this show at Peacock Players in Nashua before the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
It's very cute. It's a short 90-minute musical that's based on the Frog and Toad children's books by Arnold Lobel. And I love this musical because I grew up with the books. Did you read the books too?
I don't think I did.
Oh, you didn't? You should see if the library has them. I bet that they do. Um, so my favorite the out I mean this whole cat first of all, this was a very small cast. Everybody was talented, but my favorite characters were Frog, who was played by Joshua McLemoray, Toad, who was played by Charlie Turner, and Snail, who was played by Colby Chitwood. And my favorite songs from Frog and Toad are called I'm Coming Out of My Shell, Cookies, and Merry Almost Christmas. The next theater production that we wanted to talk about today is the production of Fraggle Rock that we saw last Saturday, April 5th, at Merrill Auditorium.
And Fraggle Rock, this was the Jim Henson company that was traveling that did this production called Fraggle Rock Live. And it's based on Jim Henson's original show that aired in the 1980s. And the five characters, main characters who were represented in the Fraggles were Red, Moki, Wimbley, Gobo, and Boober, all of whom who were in costume for live editions, full flooded Muppets, that is. Plus, there were a few other voices who did the simulation screen to make it affect like we used to see in the Muppet form. But the story was really fascinating. It's just Gobo and his imagination to lead the others to finding pieces of a lost treasure that seemed to be lost in an earthquake long ago. So Gobo was the one who was very adventuristic, and I've read a couple of books from Fraggle Rock cast before that was children's stories, and one of them was called No One Knows Where Gobo Goes. So I could tell he was that kind of adventurous Fraggle. Red was the one who was full of being loud and joyful, loving to run and yell whoopee. And her best friend was Moki, the more laid back, who liked to do yoga. And Wembley is Gobo's best friend, no question about it. And Boober was the one who was the most worrisome of all the Fraggles. But you put this together, and it's great not only for the kids, but for entertainers who grew up in that generation as well.
Um, so our favorite songs on Fraggle Rock are A-OK, Are You Ready, Doozer Marching Song, Go With the Flow, and Pass It On.
And especially like the opening theme to Fraggle Rock.
Right. So for movie reviews, the first movie which we just finished watching is A Cinderella Story, which came out in 2004, starring Hilary Duff, Jennifer Coolidge, Chad Michael Murray, and Dan Bird. Dan Bird, for those of you who don't know, plays Travis Cobb on Cougar Town. And it was fun to see him in this movie after watching Cougar Town last year, because it's fun to see where he got his start. Because in A Cinderella Story, he was obviously a teenager, and by the time that Cougar Town aired in 2009, I feel like he was probably in his like late 20s or early 30s. I don't know how old he is. I would have to look
Well,
that up.
well, you see, Gene, that show, Cougar Town, that's just 5 years in between. So Dan Bird must have only been like his early 20s if he played a teenager,
True,
unless
because
he could have played a younger version of the character based on his age.
yeah, probably. I think you're right. We have to look up how old he is on IMDb later.
So anyway, in for any of you wondering about this version, why it's called Cinderella's Story, you probably all have heard about the story of why she was named that after her stepsisters and evil stepmother. Plus, you know about the fairy godmother sending her to the ball to get the Prince Charming, and then kind of arousing afterwards with a glass slipper to find out who the actual girl was. But in this case, Hilary Duff plays this girl named Samantha Montgomery, and she's kind of a tomboyish type in high school, but she doesn't have any free time because she's always studying and working at her evil stepmom name's Fiona diner.
Well, the diner used to belong to her dad, but her dad died in an earthquake. That is one thing I like about this movie. Like, they actually give a reason to why the father passes away. In the Disney version of Cinderella, the really old-fashioned one, the original cartoon, they don't really explain how the dad dies. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing I like about this retelling of Cinderella, is that they actually tell you how the dad dies.
And also because it's the 2000s, those are the days when students were having those flip cell phones and those stylish, colorful outfits.
Yep. I had a flip phone as my first cell phone that I got as soon as I graduated from high school, so I remember those very
I had
well.
a flip phone and well until 2017, Gene.
Yeah, I know. You just recently got an iPhone. Um so as Matt was saying, Cinderella in this version of Cinderella is played by Hilary Duff, who was in Lizzie McGuire. And then her stepmother Fiona is played by Jennifer Coolidge, known for her role as Stifler's mom in American Pie. And she was also on Friends as Monica's college friend, Amanda, who has a British accent. And she was also in the Joey spinoff as Joey's um, manager, Bobby. And a good IMDb review that I saw of this movie noted that Bobby and Fiona kind of share similar characteristics, and I can see what they mean a little. And then Prince Charming is played by Chad Michael Murray, who
His real name in the movie was Austin.
he pl- he played the jock football player Austin Ames. And so, as you all know, I have been watching Gilmore Girls with my friend Kathleen, and in Gilmore Girls, Tristan played um Tristan Dugray, who was this really big bully character for Rory, but he secretly had a crush on her. And he basically um he left Gilmore Girls to start his to be in his own spin-off show, which I guess didn't last, and then he was in this movie, and he was also in Freaky Friday with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, which is coming out with a sequel on August 8th, which I can't wait to see. And I really fell in love with Chad Michael Murray when I first saw this movie. Well, actually, when I first saw Freaky Friday, which was Freaky Friday and this movie came out 1 year apart. So I saw them within 1 year of each other on the day that they released in the theater.
And Hilary Duff by 2004 had her 3 year contract of Lizzie McGuire come to a close, and then she also was in her movie where one of the best songs remembered was "What Dreams Are Made of."
Yes, that's another movie we need to watch. Lizzie McGuire movie.
And in 2004, I remember she also started with being a singer with songs like "Come Clean" and "So Yesterday."
I love So Yesterday. That's a good song.
And we are also going to review other movies like A Complete Unknown. So,
A Complete Unknown was the biopic of Bob Dylan that was nominated for an Oscar. We saw that back at the beginning of February after Valentine's Day, and it was really good. I mean, we have seen other biopic movies of other singers, such as Freddie Mercury with Bohemian Rhapsody and Elton John with Rocket Man, both of which were very good. And this movie is the same way. Um, this is basically it goes through um,
it's
but
a, it's, a,
but
it's Bob Dylan's music career. And what it eventually leads to is their annual event they used to have in Newport, Rhode Island called the Folk Festival. And this is the highlight of this movie is based on what happened during 1965, that summer in Newport. Everybody was expecting artists like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez to really take it with their normal music. But what Bob Dylan did was some little bit of rock anthem, which people didn't understand why he was doing it, and it stirred a big controversy, but it is one of the most memorable moments in music history, and it also led to the development of folk rock and Bob Dylan creating the Birds.
there was also a love triangle in between Bob, his girlfriend Sadie, and Joan Baez, which made the movie interesting. Um,
So we rated this movie A minus.
and we also, excuse me, we also rated a Cinderella Story 9 out of 10 stars on IMDb, which is pretty close to an A, and it still holds up to my original opinions of it from when I was a teenager. The next movie we are discussing. Oh, I wanted to first talk about book reviews that are related to A Complete Unknown. So I did a TBR list in February and March about movies that were books that were inspired by or like inspired the books that are similar in theme or inspired the movies that were nominated for the Oscars. So for to go along with a Complete Unknown, I read 3 books. One was called Mary Jane, which is a coming of age story of a girl. This book is by Jessica Anya Blau, and Sarah Caroli recommended it to me from one of her videos from a couple of years ago. And it's about a girl who's coming of age of the 1970s. She's sheltered, her parents are really strict. She gets a summer job babysitting for her next door neighbors who are more hip, who are much more free spirited. They're hippies, and they're raising their children to be the same way. So she basically grows up during the summer, like noticing how different her own life is from these people that she babysits for. And I think the reason why the people on Instagram who curated this list of books that go with Oscar nominated movies is because Bob Dylan is mentioned, like his music is playing in the background in some of the scenes in the books, and the parents are talking to Mary Jane about his music. Um, the next book I wanted to talk about is called We Sold Our Souls. This is a horror book by Grady Hendrix, who has also written My Best Friend's Exorcism, Horror Store, the recent book, oh, what did he come out with recently? I forget the name of it. I didn't really like it though. But aside from his recent release that I didn't like, and most of his books that I have read have gotten 4 stars, including, well, We Sold Our Souls got 3.5 stars, and it's basically a horror book that's set in the 1990s about about like a a guy who's in a band from the 1970s who has a reunion tour with his band in the 1990s after being broken up for a while, and basically he has to like track down stuff related to the band and solve a mystery, which I really liked. So I gave Mary Jane 3 stars, and We Sold Our Souls 4.5 stars.
And now the next movie that we're going to discuss that's on our schedule here is Battle of the Sexes. Now, this is based on the story of the great tennis star Billie Jean King from the 1960s and 70s and a little after. And in this movie, she is played by Emma Stone. And what happens with this movie is based on the true story that Billie Jean King had a exhibition tennis match in 1973 at the Houston Astrodome and ended up being the winner. It was shown back then originally on ABC Sports, and the broadcaster in the booth was the late great Howard Cosell.
So, as Matt was saying, Billie Jean King was played by Emma Stone from Easy A, and she was really good in this movie. Steve Carell from The Office and Beautiful Boy played Billie Jean King's competitor, Bobby. I don't remember his last name, but he was kind of a misogynistic jerk, and I didn't really like his character. And I really love how Billie Jean King, like, really proved her point in her tennis match that girls can play tennis for the same amount of money that girls can, because the main social issue that Billie Jean King and her female tennis player friends were fighting for was equal pay, which is a big issue still today in various jobs, including sports.
And I see it all the time with other sports with men and women, like tennis and golf. And I've seen it in bowling too.
I have read biographies of two different tennis players, Billie Jean King, All In, and Althea by Sally H. Jacobs. And I really enjoyed reading these memoirs because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really. Tennis is not one of my favorite sports, so it's really interesting to learn how these people got interested in it and um, how they grew in their profession of playing professional tennis. I gave both of these memoirs 4.5 stars. I also reread Carrie Soto is Back, or attempted to reread. I DNF'd it at the same position I DNF'd it before, which was at 45%. So, as you can see, Carrie Soto is Back is my least favorite Taylor Jenkins read book, and I am excited for her new release in June, which is called Atmosphere.
And the final movie that we want to mention today is the new Snow White live action. Now, in this one, Snow White is portrayed by Rachel Zegler, who was from West Side Story, who played Maria recently.
She was really good as Snow White. I think they really did good with casting her, and they did a good job with casting her love interest, Jonathan, who is one of the lead bandits. And I think it's interesting how the enemies to lovers trope is used in this movie with Snow White's relationship with Jonathan. Um,
But there were a lot of subtle differences that we saw compared to when it was an original animated movie. Now, keep in mind that the year was 1937, and this was the original first Disney full length featured film. Plus, Snow White was the original princess. So, back in 1937, woman really was not really shown as having a strong stereotype and having some empowerment.
Yes, and much like Jasmine in live action Aladdin, that's what we really liked about Snow White's character in Snow White, that she was a feminist and stood up for the empowerment of the rest of the people in her kingdom. Um, so I watched a video after we saw the movie that was a review by one of the other YouTubers that we follow, Saberspark, and that video will be tagged in the description. In it, he shares some points that we agree with. One was he said that the CGI drawings, the CGI animation of the dwarfs was really off-putting, and we definitely agree with that. We think it would have been great for disability rights if people who with dwarfism had actually been hired to play the dwarves. And I think Saberspark mentioned in his video that this was actually supposed to happen, but it didn't for some reason. Probably because of how expensive, or I don't know the reason why. The other thing that he mentioned was that Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, could not sing. Autotune could not even save her, like what they had to do for Emma Watson in Beauty and the Beast,
And Gal Gadot is also well known for
playing Wonder
playing
Woman.
Wonder Woman.
Um,
And another thing that that I discovered that was in the live action, which was different from Disney, is that the seventh dwarf Dopey kind of had some feelings and was really taking a a kickback to the other dwarves who were not getting along with him because he was afraid to show his true personality and mentioning. But he came alive in near the end, and that was a interesting fact that Dopey could talk.
yes, if people don't if people haven't seen the animated version of Snow White in a long time, Dopey does not speak. So, like, in one scene of this movie, the other dwarves really mean to him, particularly I think it's Grumpy that's really mean to him. So Snow White takes him outside to talk to him in private, and this is where the song "Whistle Where You Work" comes in, because she teaches Dopey how to whistle in order to be able to kind of break his shyness with not knowing how to speak.
And in the original Disney film, Whistle While You Work came before the dwarfs came home from their day job in the mine, and they whistled.
They did. Um, and I read a couple of short story collections that were related to Snow White. One was called Snow White Blood Red, and my favorite stories in this collection were called The Frog Prince, Snowdrop, Troll Bridge, and Little Red. And the other one was called uh, Snow White Learns Witchcraft Stories and Poems. And my favorite pieces of work in this anthology were called Snowblood Fur, Thorns and Briars, The Stepsister's Tale, and The Seven Shoes. Snow White Blood Red got 4.5 stars, and um, Snow White Learns Witchcraft Stories and Poems got 5 stars. And these anthologies are really good to read for poetry National Poetry Month. So if you want to get these books from your local library, um, for Poetry Month, I highly recommend them. Did you want to talk about Love on the Brain?
Sure, I would. This is my first time I've read a Allie Hazelwood book called Love on the Brain, and it's about this character named Dr. B. Joswitz, or whatever her name is, and she ends up being a higher draft to NASA in Houston. But what's the problem is that everything is so delayed and they demand results, and everybody is not paying attention to B and what she is capable of doing. So, but it does come until where Levi really is trying to try to get back together with B after they might have had a breakup. So this turns into a little bit of rediscovering who the true person really is with having nights of sex and getting along. But it turns out at the very end that even though the experiment, where they were showing a demonstration, it was a little bit of a flop. Everybody who was blaming B really should have understood that B really had little to do with the destruction acts. So this turned into a nice book based on Allie's ideas. Plus, what was made woman friendly, I'm starting to get along reading books like that because they are true nature and they have lots of things that I am enjoying in culture.
What Allie Hazelwood book do you think you want to read next?
Well, I would look at it and probably go for Part of Your World.
No, that's Abby
Oh, I'm
Jimenez.
sorry, Abby Jimenez.
So, like, the other Allie Hazelwood books that I've read are Bride, Love Theoretically, The Love Hypothesis, Deep End, which was her release from February, and oh, you read Love on the Brain and Bride, and then Bride is coming out with a sequel in October for Halloween.
Hmm.
So, what do you want to read next from Allie Hazelwood?
I might go with one of your suggestions. Maybe I'll even go for what we see when we go to our bookstore.
Oh, you mean when we go to the bookstore to drop the donations off
Yes.
tomorrow? Okay, great. You'll look for another Allie Hazelwood book
So,
tomorrow
so,
then.
so a couple more books I want to mention before we end our video is I'm also right now looking forward to talking about a couple of biographies and memoirs. The one I'm reading right now, which I'm on page 100, is Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mother Died. Because I'm starting to find out how she was treated like she was so small by her mom, even before her days as Sam on iCarly.
We will be reviewing I'm Glad My Mom Died in our From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR podcast in the Mother's Day segment of the podcast that will be the video will be out in May, but it will be out in June, but it will be filmed in two different parts. So the part about Mother's Day will be filmed on May 23rd.
And another bio I'm looking for at the library right now, which will be from another state, is based on the life of Nally Jacobson, who used to be news anchor on Channel 5's WCBB TV. So that's part of the reason why I'm going to be on June 8th for Portland's WMPG when I mention about bowling. Because not only am I going to mention about how to enjoy the game to your liking and try to keep the sport alive, but also how I remember with local and national TV and advertisements how they put it together. And with the channel that special and personalities from people you could trust, Nellie Jacobson played a great part in it.
So, for upcoming videos that we're doing, I will be doing a reading progress update video on the 22nd of April. Then, my next one after that will be on May 10th. And our April and May entertainment wrap up will be out on also on May 10th. And then the next episode of the Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR podcast with Kathleen will be out on June 2nd. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope you stay tuned for our upcoming videos.
And have a great and safe, happy Easter and Earth Day the week after. Good
Thank,
day now.
thank you.